And I'll start introducing our guest reader, Philip Gross. So Philip has, I think, published 27 books of poetry at the last count, for adults and even children as well. He's won many of the major awards in poetry, from the National Poetry Competition to the T.S. Eliot Prize, and indeed was nominated again for the T.S. Eliot Prize this year. I've read so many of his books now, and I think they're all wonderful. A Bright Acoustic, The Water Table, that won the T.S. Eliot Prize, Deep Field, to name but a few. And I'm still very much immersed in The 13th Angel, his current book. It is a great honour to introduce Philip today, and I'm sure you'll really enjoy what he has to share with us. So over to you, Philip.
Thank you, Stephen, and everybody for being part of this. I've never felt a very useful person who argue for the relationship between poetry and science, simply because I've got no insight at all into how anyone could not think that they were fascinatingly overlapping, not the same, but the same gift of patient and sometimes quirky curiosity, and the willingness to live with small, exact observations, which might, in time, lead to huge implications. For example, an odd behavior of a tiny grain of pollen floating on water, observed by Robert Brown in 1827, which led 70 odd years later to Einstein and other thinking deep thoughts about molecules and naming that observation Brownian motion. Not a draught or a shiver of footfall in the shut room, the Brownian study. A book cushioned hush, a bench brass bolted to the floor, the world as one held breath. And yet it moves, a weightless grain, pollen a century dead on the gloss of the water that not the least touch of the light moves, and it's hither and thithering, blithe in direction. He bends close as love. It's a step to the edge of matter. If he closes his eyes, the spark specks on his retina swarm. Nothing anywhere is still. As now, a ground of coffee twitching on clear water in a white cup stops me. Mute jitterbug alive with knowledge in it. What we lost all those years since Lucretius, that the clear space between thing and thing is all trouble, either that or delight, jouissance, a fine discontent at molecular level. Take this from the heart of things, that nothing will be fixed. These are the angels on the pinhead. Yes, stop, or believe you stop, and stare. Little jazzers, they're having a ball. My main guilt about being here this evening is it's easy to pick science out of what I've written, but chemistry as such, I'm guiltily not very much of it. Fortunately, in the last year, I've been exchanging poems and images with an American artist called Kira Faber, who's been experimenting with the nicely, quaintly obsolete technology of cyanotypes. The things in the past people made blueprints with, which can entirely depend on the odd relationship that potassium ferrocyanide has with light. This is Into the Blue. Base matter it is, like our mere carbons, and yet it knows how to turn. With light, the sun, with oxygen, the air provides the blue. Such stuff as dreams are made on. Blue like the hour that's neither day nor night, with its name like a poison. Ferrocyanide has memory. Proposes blueprints, keeps a hold on those still minutes in the presence here and there of the light, yet needs its sleep, its time in darkness. Prussian blue, like the deepening off the continental shelf, like the freediver's act of faith and breath control in plumbing one more fathom, to surface, gasping as if newborn, with no words to tell us anything but blue. That's all very well, but it's the point when science comes home to our bodies, which after all are the theme of this evening. I've had a fair bit of that in the last few years, largely on the issue of bones and other things. So if I can just share 3 shortish bits from a sequence which is coming to be called Reading the Bones. In the Department of Medical Physics, disposed just so, don't move now, on a couch as functional as a trouser press, and relax, I am a talking skeleton, suddenly shy as the lab technician steps behind her screen. Now she will strip me of my skin, soft tissue, pulsing veins, and down to brass tack bones. What secrets might my lumbar vertebrae be whispering to the humming machine? What lapses, what lacks, what levity? A wrong thing for my bones with their pumice stone pocks and cavities. With each year gone, less gravity to anchor me. If this was water under me, I might float away. The map, the deep interior that the X-ray imparts in negative. I am my own dark continent, as far as the shores of the moon, as near as a lightning strike that starts a long cold smolder down the nerve. My Cordillera, feel the grate, the slip, the grinding, and its fault line rifts. Again, the plate tectonic ache, just a shrug, the raw quick of the planet could spill. What can we do but study oracles and shadows, a blip on the Richter scale, a shudder in the night? Remember limestone, that's halfway to bone, or bone to it. Innumerable depths, those tiny exoskeletons sifting down, and porous as my bones are. In limestone country, with its swallets, potholes, those dizzying downward openings into the dark inside me, always the urge to drop a stone, a word, a question, then listen. How long to the splash, the echo, the answer? Still nothing. Still waiting, or nothing at all. And in the end, after all, we are the elements we're made of. What do we do with us then? This is my parents, and it's called A Love Song of Carbon. For 6 years, on a high shelf in an upstairs bedroom, she was the only one who didn't change. Down here in the oxygen economy, we came and went, our carbon still mixed with water, breathing, moistening, drying, yes, even our youngest there, etching in breath on the glass, now a smiley or down in the mouth now, moon face dripping. But he took time, our eldest, withering without her, needing ointments for his thin and flaking skin. The sores on his shin did the weeping, the chemical bonds coming loose, letting parts of him go. As patient as she'd learnt to be in life, she waited, dressed and contained in leather-textured cardboard round a screw-top urn. 6 years till the day they could meet in all simplicity, at last entirely conversant with each other. Ash into ash, lifts from my broadcast scatter and into a wet wind, for winnowing, chalkier flakes dropping free into wire-rooted ling, small gorse, bell heather, rabbit scuts, the finer grains fetched up, we flinched and stay, yes, why not let them dust us? Lifting towards Sheepstore, North Hessery Tor, Great Mist Tor, and the great deeper moor beyond whatever skyline he and she had ever reached. The rain clouds come up over Cornwall like the grey Atlantic, generations, wave on wave on wave. I think that's where I stop, isn't it?
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening.
So much. Amazing. Wonderful to actually hear about compounds interacting with light. I know Sarah will love that. And to hear blue described in those terms was really wonderful. And those poems really bring the real world to us. You know, things like bones affect us all. And thank you so much for getting us off to such a wonderful start, Philip. That was a real treasure. Thank you so much. Well, okay, that takes us through to our supporting readers. But yeah, please, once again, show your appreciation for Philip's contribution there, please. That was wonderful. Thank you for inspiring us, Philip. Amazing. Right, well, our first open mic reader is Claire Collison. Claire was one of 3 winners of the inaugural Women's Poets Prize. She was also placed second in the Winchester Poetry Prize 3 years ago. And she's also performed very well in the inaugural Resurgence Prize and the Hippocrates Prize. Her debut pamphlet, Placebo, was published by Blueprint. And if you haven't read that, I really recommend it. It's a wonderful journey into, I guess, living with cancer and what that entails. And so I give the floor to you, Claire.
Thank you, Stephen. And thank you, Philip. Beautiful reading. I love the connection of bones and limestone, and that how synchronistic, how synergistic that Placebo with Blueprint. It made me think of Helen Chadwick's Of Mutability, which Joe Shapcott then wrote about, which we used with the cyanotypes as well. I really enjoyed that. So Placebo is the poem that I've chosen from it is I'm going to screen share because it's quite a complicated one, and I usually shy away from reading it. But it's called Side Effects / Tamoxifen, and it's for Jeanne Barret. So I'm just going to read a footnote about her. I'm in Spain at the moment, and this poem is set there. And yeah, chemicals basically saved my life, I would say, from chemotherapy through Herceptin and onto tamoxifen. I had quite a cocktail over a couple of years there. And this poem is kind of on the way out of that cancer experience. And I think it's the place where I pivot back to writing more about connections with the planet than just about looking into my body. So tamoxifen threw me into a lot of hot flashes and all the kind of menopausal symptoms that I missed out on. And there's not much I made up in it, but basically the air conditioner was connected with a pipe through to my neighbor's wall, which had a bougainvillea growing in it. So I believe that my sweat was actually growing this plant next door. And the footnote, which I'll share now, is that I've dedicated the poem to Jeanne Barret, and she's recognized as the first woman to have circumnavigated the globe. And she joined Louis-Antoine de Bougainville's expedition disguised as a man. So if the technology's working, I should be able to, here we go. Side effects, tamoxifen. Damning my estrogen, pirate cells mutinied, and now I contain entire weather systems. The flowers are tiny, waxy, trumpet-shaped. Even in the mountains, with a breeze from the sea and an aerial view. A swollen area at the base of the tubular flower, the nectary has a long, thin neck, accessible to pollinators. At night, my heat is transformed to bougainvillea. Although not technically part of the flower, specialized leaves called bracts surround the true flower. See, beyond the round house and cool turquoise pool. Each bract has a central vein with several spider-like veins radiating from it. Papery petals. My fever manifest sprawls the flat roof, the wreath between moony dishes. Dressing slightly by withholding water until soil is dry can spur blooming. The aircon drains and implicates. She binds her breath, annotates the plant, sexual part, stamen, pistil, siphons my sweat to fault-tolerant roots. The plant will not be named for her. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. That was truly wonderful. Really lovely to see the poem as well. Wonderful. Okay, so we're going to move on now to Fiona Perry. Fiona is an accomplished writer of fiction as well as poetry. And just looking at her poetry, Alchemy was her debut collection, published by Turas Press in October 2020. And the collection was runner-up in the 2021 Poetry Book Awards. So Fiona's going to read a poem for us now.
Thank you, Stephen, for organising. I'm having a great time so far. Amazing poem, Claire. Thank you for that. So this poem is called An Animal Within an Animal, and it's based on an idea or a belief in old science. This idea of the wandering womb, that a woman's womb wandered around the body and was untamable. And it was first seen in the medical texts of ancient Greece, but it's an idea that persisted up until Victorian times. And this wandering womb was thought to cause suffocation and hysteria. And it was treated with various odors or potions, chemical concoctions to help reposition it into the correct position. So it really inspired me, because it made me think about the idea that science is supposed to be a very rational endeavor, but it's not immune to societal influences. So this is the poem. Animal within an animal. In the middle of the flanks of women lies the womb, an animal within an animal. Mine wandered off somehow, coordinates unknown, a displacement that caused a tendency to make trouble for others. So relentless efforts were made to anchor it into a more suitable position, to stave off licentiousness, to stem the flow of hysterical suffocation, to convert lasciviousness into maternal care. Once again, the man downstairs adjusts his tie in the looking glass, all mustachioed authority and advanced scientific knowledge. He is here to coax and cajole that wild beast with fetid and rank smells to the nostrils. Tallow candle when it is blown out, vapor of birds' feathers, especially partridge or woodcock, of man's hair or goat's hair, of dead mouseling, of pig trotter and such like. But my pet refused to return onto its own place. Even when I lowered my body into a bath of lungwort, juniper, fleabane, camphire and green anise boiled in water. She shifted only slightly, pricked her ears when offered sweet and aromatic fumigations. Hither and thither she flailed. So I tore the whalebone from my belly, mounted my broodmare and galloped away. In the medical notes, perplexed, they surmised this untamable creature remains a spinning needle on a compass.
Wow. Terrific, Fiona. Thank you so much. Wow, this is quite some evening, isn't it? Thank you. Wonderful. I can see some amazing comments coming through in the chat as well. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Okay, this takes us on to Sarah Watkinson, our third supporting reader. Sarah's debut poetry pamphlet, Dung Beetles Navigate by Starlight, won the 2016 Cinnamon Press Pamphlet Prize. And she actually was the inaugural writer in residence at Witham Woods, producing The Woods of Hazel with Romola Parish. And her debut full collection, Photovoltaic, is a fantastic read, published by Graft Poetry in 2021. I first met Sarah at St Hilda's, Oxford, where we were both involved with SIPO and Torch. And that's where actually I first met Philip as well, at St Hilda's. So it's great, great to have you here, Sarah, and thank you for your ongoing support of these events. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Forgive me, I've just had a bout of bronchitis, so if I might be a bit hoarse, I just have to apologize. I'm a biologist by background and came to poetry quite late, and I found it really touched a chord when Philip said that he couldn't understand people who didn't see that science and poetry were virtually the same thing, because I've always felt that very strongly. The first time I met Stephen, he was giving a fantastic talk about drug discovery. And it fascinated me particularly because as a biologist, I'm fascinated by the fact that although fungi and plants and animals have bodies that look completely different, when you get down to the chemistry that goes on inside them, it's virtually the same. And it just gets turned to different purposes according to what those different organisms need to do. I've often found that a good start for a poem, if I want to go into something a bit more deeply and understand it better, is to read a rather general scientific paper about it. And the poem I'm going to read is inspired by a paper called Reward Processing in the Opioid System in the Brain. It's by Lemere et al., 2009, Physiological Reviews. It's absolutely fascinating because it explains how there's a part of the brain that says hooray when it receives a certain chemical. And this is what makes you happy when you drink alcohol, when you do various things, when you drink hallucinogenic whatnots. And this shone a great light for me on an experience I had about 30 years ago in a hospital when I was in great pain and I was given a magical potion. So that's what my poem is about. It's called Aspirin and Nepenthe. Instead of tablets, the nurse gave me a drink, brown and fizzing. The migraine pain stopped. And more, like a laying on of hands, all was well and would be well. I glimpsed a new heaven and craved a repeat prescription, not for pain, but to escape again beyond the wall of self. You tell me opioids aren't simple medicine. They play on brain rewards that nature gave to make all creatures serve their line's survival. Deep pleasure, the spring of appetite and longing. Morphine's a poppy's weapon against weevils. I hope as those bugs taste sour juice, they see, magically, beyond their insecthood, a wider sky, infinitely good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's lovely to hear about opioids again. Having thought about them quite a lot. Although I've never drunk any opiates.
Nor do I, as a rule.
Yeah. I obviously haven't lived very much yet, but thank you very much. That was amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we really are overlapping the chemical sciences with poetry tonight, quite markedly. Thank you again, Sarah. And this takes us then to our last reader before the break, Chris Poichi. Chris focuses his poetry on human and the natural environments and how the natural and human worlds overlap. He was the editor for Northwoods Now for a number of years. And his collection, The Weight of Light, was published by Red Squirrel Press. Great to have you here, Chris. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you, everybody. Really enjoying so far. That last poem, I now know what Beetlejuice is. This poem really is a bit of a cheat, because it was prompted by something I saw about neutrinos, and as they don't actually interact with very much, I suppose there's not much real chemistry going on with them. But the poem came about anyway. There's a body in it, or there are bits of a body. And I should also say that in honor of the ceaselessness of neutrinos, this poem is unpunctuated. So I'm just going to read it straight through. It's called All the Time Billions. All the time, billions of almost nothings passing right through us. It would take 4 light years traveling through solid lead for a neutrino to notice anything else in the universe actually existed. So this holy palaver of skin, bone, hair, etc. is less than mist. And the migrations of geese, Plato's head, Bach fugues, aspirin, the difference engine, rainforests, and the Paris metro, barely more than the sheen of dust on a bat's wing. Who knows? Maybe even you. Yes, you with your blue northern eyes and memories of the sea are flowing through this poem, wrapped and quantumly beyond its trembling nest of sounds, and are wrought of the very stuff of light, improbable and utter. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. Wow. Well, yeah. If you could all perhaps join me in thanking the first batch of supporting readers, and then we'll have a 10-minute break. Thank you, everyone.
Right, thank you.
Keep the comments coming in the chat, and we'll come back at about, say, 10 to 8. Thank you very much. Yeah, welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you've all had a cup of tea or something stronger, and you're set for part 2. All right, okay, so I'll just introduce our next reader, Isabel Del Rio. Isabel is a writer of many genres across fantasy, sci-fi, and other genres. And if I just focus on some recent poetry books that she's published, they include Madrid, Punto de Fuga, and Dolorum Ipsium, which was dedicated to the victims of 2020 pandemic. Lovely to have you here with us, Isabel. Over to you.
Hello, good evening. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm in such fantastic company. I'm honored. Thank you very much. Right, well, I'm going to read a poem that I wrote recently, very recently. One morning at breakfast time, I felt I had 100 birds inside my chest, and it wasn't poetry, it was actually a heart attack. So I was taken to hospital, and in hospital I wrote this poem just a few weeks ago, as I said, and I wanted to emulate the heartbeats, and nothing better than the iambic pentameter, which is the ba-bum, ba-bum, ba-bum. I wrote it in verses of 10 syllables, but with no obvious or premeditated rhymes, barely a few internal rhymes. I normally write free verse, but it was a good exercise to adhere to a fixed structure and a fixed rhythm. I also write in 2 languages. I write in English and in Spanish. And after writing this version in English, I wrote a version in Spanish, which is a free variation on the same theme. In fact, much more dramatic. Anyway, here goes. My beating heart in iambic pentameters. So what to do when it turns sour and dark, and when it might already be the end? Things I ignored lay dormant for so long, and beats no more the waltzy 3/4, but jumbled rhythms vanquishing the heart. Are then my plans perpetually postponed, my life unmade, the patterns of my speech forlorn, yearbooks cast off, in unison the stitches of my tapestry unstitched? And yet the sky continues to be blue, albeit for me more alabaster grey. As to the sun, it's born again, though with such temperatures as suited to the night. Accordingly, awakenings ensue, a novel beat, a cadence quite unknown, another way of dancing to all tunes. But so much sweeter this time it will be. Kind-heartedness prevails among the stars. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. That was wonderful. Thank you. Right, amazing. So let's welcome Anne Enith Cooper to the event. She describes herself as a poet, photographer, activist, daydreamer, seeker, and semi-eternal optimist, which I really like. She is the author of the pamphlet Touched, former writer in residence at Pressing Gardens Estate, and co-creator of Living Under the Shadow of Regeneration, and the editor of And Then There Was Light, and Out Is the Word. So yeah, welcome, and over to you.
Well, thank you, and hi everyone. It's great, really great to be here this evening, and I'm so so pleased that to, you know, gratitude to Stephen for including me in this tonight. So I have a poem which features the body, and I guess it touches on body chemistry in the sense that when body chemistry goes wrong, I'm not going to say too much about the poem, but I started writing this about 18 months ago. I was taking a bit of winter sun in Fuerteventura and was told that a good friend had, you know, days to live, basically. So it's kind of a bit of autobio. And I really think on the process, I mean, I probably wrote the first draft in an hour or so. And it has taken 18 months to actually really kind of feel that I've finalised the thing. And interestingly, just about a week ago, I was reading an essay by Donald Hall, I think it was, just wrote in about 2005 about poetry and ambition. And there's a sort of, I don't know how serious this essay is meant to be, but because he mentions at one point about how Horace said that you should sit on a poem for 10 years and Pound said, no, 5 years is enough. But I certainly think with this poem, I did actually need that time to get the distance from the subject and from my own, you know, get me out of the way. So so this is The Dying of the Light. The dying of the light has its own beauty. From my balcony, I watch as the sun sets. Blue-grey clouds shot through with golden drifts hover over the teal sea. The scene is darkening even as I wait, knowing your life is no longer obedient to a machine, your body attacking itself, I understand. And it's all too sudden, too soon, and I so far away. The darkness grows as I open the notebook on my knee, though I'm told it's not if, but when. I search for a sign in the clouds, the shape-shifting clouds. Notice softly taking form 3 winged figures, angels. When I look down to write this line and up again, they've already disappeared. The darkness near complete now, only the faint light of Corralejo visible across the water, the only indicator left of where land meets sky. I see a body laying supine, how I imagine you must be. 2 legs, a torso, an arm flung aside, the head with leonine hair, just like yours when slacklining or after you've taken off your cycling helmet and shook your head. And just at that moment, a crescent moon breaks through the clouds, glowing, her luminosity casting a circle of light, fading in and out like a beating heart. And I think about your blood and your breath. And the next time I look up, that too has gone. Venus appears, glittering, just above where the moon shuddered. I remember your empathy, intellect, kindness, and wit. Yet she too flickers and fades. Somewhere in the world, the sun must be shining. Somewhere the sky cloudless. On a ward in Manchester, your father and brother sit either side of you, holding your hands in theirs until your light departs. So thank you. I think a little stanza slipped out of that.
Thank you, Anne. That was,
And thank you to everyone for some wonderful, wonderful poetry. And Philip, I didn't want Philip to stop. Is Philip still here? Yes, you are. Really, I was hoping you'd just carry on. But yeah, thanks to everyone.
that was amazing. The body theme really came through there, and thank you for sharing those words. Thank you. We may have a treat at the end. Philip has offered to read another one. Thank you so much. Right, we can move on to I can introduce Glodar Beresford Don. Glodar is an internationally recognised poet, well published in the UK, Ireland, and the USA, including in Poetry Chicago, the London Magazine, the Salzburg Poetry Review, the Irish Times. She's won Irish Poem of the Year, among other prizes. The Arts Council of Ireland's Emerging Writer Award and the UK Clarissa Loard Emerger Writer Award. So we're very lucky to have you, Glodar. We've actually also collaborated recently on a poem, which is exciting. So over to you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Great, thanks. Thank you. I'm very lucky to be here, Stephen, and I'm sorry. I live in the woods here in County Waterford in Ireland, and my Wi-Fi is pretty bad, so it's bringing me back to the pandemic days of just, you know, sporadically connecting with the world. So the poems I've heard have been so beautiful, and I'm sorry about the poems I didn't hear, but I will be able to go back on the recording, I take it, will I? Yeah. Good. So Stephen asked me 7 sugar cubes because it makes reference to the body, which is tonight's theme. And I suppose it's a shortish enough poem, so there probably won't be any harm in giving the genesis of the poem. The poem was written in the wake of my father's death back in 2015. So he actually died in Australia while he was visiting my brother, who was an emigrant in Australia, an emigrant from Ireland. So he was visiting him with my mother for Christmas in 2015 and died very suddenly over there, was a well man leaving. And we discovered within a few days of him arriving that he actually wasn't a well man. He had cancer, which he or none of us knew about. And over a period of 6 or 7 days, he died in that hemisphere. So for I suppose after he died, for that initial 6, 7, 8 months, I began to question, like everybody does when they've had a very close loss, where is he gone? You know, where is the soul gone? And I had a job at the time during the summer, which was this very enjoyable job in our small coastal town of teaching English to Spanish students. And I used to give them a word every night going home. And one of the words was soul, S-O-U-L, because I wanted them to discuss it with their host families and to think about the colloquial use of the word. So the following day, these 2 kids, teenagers, came back in, and one of them said to me, "Your soul is what makes you who you are." And the other child said, "Your soul weighs 21 grams. And I was fascinated with this because I was like, where did this come from? And she then told me that this 1901 experiment in Massachusetts had been carried out by a doctor called Dr. Duncan MacDougall. And he said that the soul weighed 21 grams. He had done a survey on a lot of people who were dying and took into consideration all of the differences, and arrived at the conclusion that the soul weighed 21 grams when between pre-death and post-death weight. I think that theory has been disproven since, but in any event,
Thank you so much, Bleda. That's such a moving poem. Amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, really lovely to hear the background and the process behind the poem too. Yeah, I'd love to introduce Miranda Lynn Barnes next as our next reader. Miranda's debut pamphlet, Blue Dot Abad, was published by V Press in 2020, and then she's well published in many publications and journals, and we published a collaborative collection of poems called Formulation that I'm sure she's going to tell you about. Over to you, Miranda. Lovely to see you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, thank you very much. So yes, I'm going to be reading from Formulations, which is the collaborative pamphlet that Stephen and I worked on. I also met Stephen as well as Sarah at the SciPo events, which were wonderful, and I treasured those while we were able to have them. And during the pandemic, Stephen and I talked about collaborating on something around chemistry and poetry, and we created new forms based in chemistry, and then wrote poems in those forms. And this began with using the chemical formula to sort of translate component parts of that formula into parts of a poetic form, and that evolved to using the skeletal form of the molecules and many other sort of influences. And the poem I'm going to read tonight is called Undecanoan Doxology. It's my last poem in the book, and this is one of the poems where we evolved from using the number of valence electrons to determine the number of words per line to actually determining the meter. But things like whether something has a single covalent bond or a double covalent bond determined whether it be a slant rhyme or a whole rhyme, those sorts of things. So I won't go into that too much because I did talk about it a little bit more at the last meeting, but please do pick up a copy from Small Press at Tangent Books if you're interested in knowing more, or I'm always happy to talk to people about the work we did there. So this poem sort of is looking at undecanone, or to undecanone as a molecule, but also the larger spectrum of biosynthesis that we looked at in chemistry, and the things that the benefits that come out of these plants that create these molecules One of the reasons that Stephen wanted to look at these particular molecules is their benefits to the human body. And so this is a sort of closing praise to biosynthesis in a way. Undecanoan doxology. 1. Could we grow wise, theorize, aegis, a way to synthesize? 2. Give names as we discover the atoms and chains. Give thanks as we determine new actions workable. Gain grace in the form of transformation often. Guard life, teacher of botanical acumen. Build up molecules, anabolic process. Be blessed with life by amino acids absorbed. Repel, entertain an armory, remedy. Body, nourished as symmetry, as a symmetry permits. 3. So we praise what begins in photosynthesis, what ends in biosynthesis, only to begin again. Open, valence, exchange. Amen. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks so much, Miranda. Amazing. Rightio, thank you. So I've got a poem for us now, before we move on to Mandy Haggith. It's been lovely to hear about the use of chemistry in the body and some biology as well, and even some physics in some of the poems. And we've all touched on these themes to varying degrees. I also collaborated with Sam Illingworth on Crown of Sonnets that touched on astronomy, and if anyone's interested, I can send you details about that. But the poem I'm going to share today is a poem written in memory of my daughter who passed away last year. It's been accepted by Black Pear Press's Life's Wonders anthology and is going to feature in a new book that I've just received the contract for. So that's exciting, of poems written in her memory. So this poem is called Fists. Fists. Our fists side by side, palm side down, 4 squares with turrets for knuckles, remind me of our overlapping genes. Your fists are perfect square, adipose smooth. My fists are more imperfect, scored with blue veins. The similarity of our fists, though, is clear. I want to see your DNA, learn its sequences, immerse myself in its aqueous order. So I look at your fists, so that I can remember you, the biological you, on days when you are not physically here. But heavy cloud surrounds me, a delightful corpus. There is so much more to you than fists. Climbing out of your biology, your nucleotides, is your soul, and concurrently your soul envelops your cells. Your soul is beautiful, gentle like Clementia. Your fists don't throw punches. They are only memorials to your existence here. The merest heat becoming parcels of love. Our fists side by side, palm side down, our moment in time on earth, unearthing identity. Thank you. Okay, So yeah, let's introduce Mandy Haggith. She is a writer based in Assynt in the Northwest Highlands of Scotland. And it seems to me she has a wonderful life exploring the oceans and the seas up there. And yeah, she has written many books, and some of her, she's written fiction, non-fiction, poetry. Her poetry collections include Trees Meet Sea and Briny, the new collection from Red Squirrel Press. And I'm really enjoying that at the moment. It's a fantastic book. And we're also beginning to work on something together, which is exciting. So over to you, Mandy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Thanks very much for having me here tonight. And what a feast of poetry. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you. I'll read a poem from the new book, Briny, which is, they're all sea poems, sea related in some form or another. This one is a poem about CO2, that molecule which is causing us so much to think about at the moment, and the body connection will hopefully become clear as I read on. I found writing about climate change incredibly difficult. That idea that it's a hyper object that is too complex to get any kind of focus on, and it feels to me that to write poetry you need to get some kind of clarity of focus. And then I came across this fact, which became the title of the poem, and that unlocked a possibility for me to turn my feeling of culpability as one of us who are responsible for climate change into something I could actually express. So this is: the volume of 1 kilogram of CO2 is roughly the same as that of a coffin. Every hour, the average Briton fills a coffin. My wood-burning stove fills 10 per day. My journey to work fills 25 coffins, 25 more coming back. This is starting to bring it home. To visit my sister, 82 coffins. My aged father needs company, but it's 104 coffins for us to go there. At least my addiction to fancy notebooks produces a mere 6 coffins per year. See how easily I become complacent. A mere 6. I'm not vegan yet, but the 130 coffins from just 1 kilo of cheese is giving me pause, especially if I put inside each coffin a salt-flooded Bangladeshi woman, a sub-Saharan child, drought-stricken, a capsized Inuit hunter, or, filling 6 coffins, the 4 legs, head, and torso of a polar bear. Thank you.
Brilliant, Mandy. Thank you. Thanks so much for joining.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, we had some great comments in the chat for everyone. So thank you to you all. I'm just going to pause recording for the moment. Over to you.
Okay. All I can say about this evening is that if we'd sat down and planned it in advance to be a careful weave of words and themes and links, it wouldn't have been nearly as subtle and coherent and convincing as this evening of what I presume is pure serendipity has been. I do trust that process. It is what really makes poetry. So to go on perhaps with the mood of the last piece we heard of Dorrins, which was a kind of praise song. It's both that and it's a kind of love song also, both for a person, but also for matter, for stuff. This is the Song of the Scans. This is the song of the cell's soft throb, the quivering coherences, their shuffling the profit and loss of life to have and to hold. This is the trace on the scan, clouds, miasma of tissue, the ghost things of bone. And this is knowing what I know, that these shadows are you. And this is the song of the fidgeting molecule, shunting the code that says be this, says be more, says be other to else. And this is my own, the whisper of weakness in the bone mass, flecks of space speckling out as if to disperse me, to drift me away. And this is the song within songs of the orbiting next to nothing of the atom, mere points of purpose in their world to unthinkable distance, each its own universe in which, between, within, love, listen with me now, it's where we live, is silence, and the silence sings. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Philip. Yeah, it reminds me of the 13th Angel, where a theme that comes up there is what's there in the silence. And that's often a very magical place, isn't it? Thank you so much. And wow, I would just like to lead us all in thanking everyone really for everyone's contribution. Thank you again, everyone, for turning up and sharing your wonderful work. It was just such high quality, and it shows you what's possible really with just an open mind and where we can go using elements of science to add value to our poetry. It's amazing. I hope you enjoyed that. Please do get in touch and let me know if there's anything you want shared on the Facebook page. I'm going to stop recording.